The Frazier History Museum is actually a young institution. I think we're actually 8.5. We were founded by a collector of guns, in particular guns and swords somewhat, and he's just very interested in history. Our focus is national and international rather than just local. So we have things from all over the world, basically. We have Asian things, we have Louisville things, we have California things, we have all sorts of different historical items. We're on the museum's 3rd floor in the Royal Armouries galleries. We're the only non-UK partner with the British Royal Armouries. They have a collection of artifacts here ranging from really the Bronze Age up to World War I. These items are tournament armor from the time of Henry VIII. When you think about Henry VIII, he was known for many things, probably foremost for his 6 wives. But in fact, he was a tremendous athlete, and jousting was kind of one of the dangerous sport of the day, and he was really into that. And he would order new armors the way somebody today might get a new sports car. This show of armor is from the Royal Armouries, and it indicates the ways in which an armor can be converted, whether for battle use or for tournament. And when you face these long brown objects in the back, or lances, when you've got one of those coming at you, handled by some guy mounted on a really big, heavy horse, you would be worried that your regular armor might not be up to the impact. And so they would have reinforcements. They would sometimes wear this plate armor and put another shoulder plate over the top to take the impact. So that's why you see those bolts and things, and the sort of hook coming out of his right breast is actually the thing that holds the lance, helps him hold it up. It tuck under his arm, hold in his hand, but rest it on the breastplate. And then it dawned on them that it just wasn't good enough. This stuff was heavy, and it was better to get out of the way and dodge behind something than it was to be stuck standing there wearing a pile of metal. So they switched to things like leather, which would, help a little bit, but basically you could move more quickly and more effectively. These are actually from the Jamestown time period. When you think about England's role in the development of the Americas, particularly North America, these would be the kind of things that the colonists were equipped with. And one of the most interesting things about our partnership with the British Royal Armouries is that we are actually able to borrow some of the same artifacts that the Jamestown colonists borrowed. Because when you went to settle a colony for England, you were equipped by the Tower of London, and they didn't give it to you, they expected it back if you came back. Of course, they were taking bets on the side as to if they'd ever see it again. There's a lot of debate about whether they were given outdated equipment, because if you think of 1600, this equipment is a little older, maybe by 50 or 75 years. The reason for that is that what they figured out is, and what the kind of questions they asked is, what kind of weapons do you think you're going to be facing? And the answer was, well, arrows. Okay, well, if you're going to be facing arrows, then you'll find this kind of armor effective. If you were facing bullets, you wouldn't use this. It has to do with the speed of the projectile. A slower projectile, like an arrow, is going to be repelled by a breastplate, where a bullet would probably go through it. These are some of the kinds of objects that we have that tell the broader American story, that might be originally illustrated by a gun, but actually points out that there's a bigger picture here and some of the issues that came up around the period of a specific weapon. The bear is one of the original teddy bears. Bears were toys, particularly in Germany. This is made by Steiff, which is a German company. But it wasn't until Teddy Roosevelt went on a bear hunt. It's the classic thing. The president goes on a bear hunt. There were bears here yesterday, but the president shows up, you can't find a bear. So they eventually found a bear, but not where the president was. So they tied the bear to a tree and got the president and brought him over to where this bear was tied up. and said to him, well, go ahead and shoot your bear. And he said, I can't shoot a bear tied to a tree. So they let the bear go, and I don't think it actually survived the meeting with the scouts because it was badly clubbed before it was tied up. But the story got out, and Roosevelt was also known as a conservationist, not necessarily in terms of saving the lives of animals, but he was known to care about wildlife. So this bear became attached to him as a symbol, and a couple of companies vied to make this artifact that they thought would sell pretty decently. We're all still hugging teddy bears, and it was supposed to be sort of a short-lived fad, and it has rather stayed the course. This glass candy dish is shaped like the mane, and it too is a sort of a transition between a famous historical incident and something that just became a sort of ubiquitous collectible. The Maine sank in 1898. Probably one of the boilers blew up. But we were on the brink of the war with Spain, and all we needed was an incident. It's famous that William Hearst, the newspaper man, said to Roosevelt, if you provide me an incident, I will provide you a war, showing that even at the time, people like Hearst understood the power of the media to generate patriotic sentiment and even patriotic anger in a way that would send us from peace to war pretty quickly. And it was important because this was the first international war since the War of 1812, basically since the sort of prolonged bouts of the War of Independence. So this was a big deal. We were going to war, not the Civil War, we were going to war with a foreign country. Remember the Maine was a patriotic invocation to say, never forget that good Americans got blown out of the water by evil antagonists. So when supposedly Teddy Roosevelt led his troops into battle in places like Cuba, they probably would shout, remember the Maine, so that the Cubans would go, oh gosh, we're sorry we blew up the Maine, because if we hadn't, then these mean Americans wouldn't be zipping over the hill armed and prepared to kill us. This is the kind of thing that actually you might still find in somebody's, I don't know, grandmother's or great-grandmother's house. It's just a candy dish. There were lots of these made. It was a very popular item in the day. It's simply a replica, sort of very proximate replica of the Maine before it sank. When you look back at a historic weapon, you kind of marvel that anyone did anything without an AK-47, And when you look at something like the Kentucky rifle, you realize not only is it a lot of skill in making that rifle, but it's a lot of skill in using it. And it's not all about shooting other people, it's about survival. The point of looking at the past is to say, why are we where we are today, and where are we going to go in the future, and do we want to go there? That's why you have to have a history museum, I think.